My name is Scott Bennett. I live in Bismarck, North Dakota. I grew up in Seattle, Washington. I've been out here for about 8 years. And I work at Chambers and Bloom Psychological Services here in Bismarck.
What's your job title?
I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and I'm trained to work with adults and with children.
Tell us about your education.
I have a PhD in clinical family psychology, and so what that entailed is I did a bachelor's degree, which is a regular 4-year college degree. Then I did a 2 years master's degree, and then I went for further studies and got a doctorate degree.
What do you do in your job?
I do a variety of things. The most obvious thing is I do therapy with people, which is what most people will be familiar with what psychologists do when they're doing therapy, because it's the kind of thing you see on TV. Another thing I do, though, is a lot of testing. We call it psychological evaluations, are ways to measure anything from how much stress or depression a person has to something like an IQ test to measure their cognitive abilities. And then I also do a lot of consultation. So I work with some of the group homes and treatment facilities in the state in terms of kind of when they get stuck working with a kid, they'll have the doctor, more the expert, come in and tell them, try A or B or C, and try to coach them through that process.
How many hours do you normally work in a week?
It varies quite a bit. I have a lot of control over that, so when I have more time and need more money, I work more hours. When I want to be more chill, I work less hours. But it's typically a 40-hour work week.
Do you take work home with you?
I do. I don't need to, but sometimes it's easier for me to maybe do some testing during the day and then go home, take care of my family, and after my kids go to bed, then I'll work for a couple hours on my computer at home and take it back to work the next day.
How would you describe the pace at which you work?
Again, that varies and that comes and goes. Therapy, unlike a lot of things, is actually helping people slow down, stop the business of life, and think about what they're doing. So that's a pace that a laid-back guy like me kind of enjoys, that sort of slow, mellow pace. But then there are other times where I'm having to testify in court and get documents ready, and I have deadlines where I'm as frantic as anybody else.
How long did you go to school?
I did a little bit quicker because I went through summers and things like that. Most college students take summers off, but I did a 4-year bachelor's degree, a 2-year master's degree, and then my doctorate degree was 3 years of coursework, and then a year of doing a dissertation, which is a big research project, and then a year of doing a residency or an internship.
How has your education prepared you for your career?
Tremendously. My kind of job is one that you couldn't possibly do without the education. So it's something that's completely necessary. And the nice thing about choices in America is there's so many different universities. They're all essentially the same. Psychology is the same from one end of the country to the other, but they're also very unique. And so you can find your niche in terms of applying for different programs that fit your style and personality. So that's nice too.
Have you worked in other jobs like this?
Yeah, because to become a doctor, there's so many years of education. A lot of the times, people like myself work along the way, like a kind of social worker type jobs, or working as kind of counselors and therapists on a lower level which helps train you for when you become, a psychologist and licensed and all that.
What would be the starting wage for a job like yours?
That's difficult to say because it kind of depends on how many hours you work and how much you do. I typically worked for, I don't know, once I got my doctorate degree, maybe for about $40,000 for the first couple of years until I felt fully trained and ready. As a practicing psychologist with a regular load, you probably make a little over $100,000 in the private sector at least.
Why did you choose this career?
I chose it probably for the same reason most psychologists choose it, is maybe more personal reasons. Trying to figure out my own psychological problems and issues, things in my own family, and wanting to have a better life in the future than the one I had in the past. And I felt like learning a lot about psychology would help helped me personally more so than professionally, I think.
What goals do you have in your career?
I think just to get into a community, get involved, try to help people, make an impact on people's lives. I have a lot of personal goals, and just in terms of trying to figure out human beings and what makes them tick and how the mind works and how emotions work. But professionally, I just like to share that with other people. I think one thing that's maybe different about me is stuff like what I'm doing right here. I like to get out of the therapy room and try to find ways to maybe give psychology to people, and in terms of helping them proactively before problems happen and not just fixing problems once they occur. So I try to do a lot of trainings and workshops and parenting classes, and at some point I like to get some of my writings published and put that out there too.
Do you travel for your job?
A little bit. I travel to various treatment facilities. Like, for instance, Prairie Learning Center is, I don't know, it's about an hour and 15 minutes out of Bismarck. I go there every Fridays to try to help out. I travel sometimes for workshops and conferences. One of the disadvantages of North Dakota is a lot of times the big, workshops and trainings are in Minneapolis or Chicago, so sometimes I go for that. But I don't travel to do work a whole lot.
What do you think it takes to be successful in this career?
Psychology is tricky because it requires a lot of the nerdy kind of left brain thinking, statistics and science and memorizing brain parts and what they do, and it takes a lot of right brained kind of social skills and people skills. And I think most of us tend to be more one or the other. We tend to be more right brained or more left brained. And one of the tricky things about psychology is you really have to be a skilled people person. You've got to have natural communication, social skills, but at the same time you've got to turn around and be a science nerd and understand all the studies and statistics. So that's the thing that makes this field tricky, I think.
What do you find are the most difficult decisions to make?
Me, it's collaborating with other people. It's pretty easy for me to work one-on-one with a client in therapy. It's more when I work with Charles Hall or Pride Manchester House or some of these facilities where you've got kids with high needs that I'm working with that are very difficult, tricky kids to work with, but you have to coordinate that with parents and school teachers and their doctor and their nurse and their clinical staff, and you've got to try to get everybody on the same page. I love that challenge. I love solving those puzzles and riddles, but it's very difficult to get 20 people to work together on helping a kid, where it's much easier to work one-on-one with a kid and just help them myself. And those are the challenges I like.
You've kind of already answered this, but do you work independently or on a team? And if you do work on a team, can you give some examples?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I do a lot of one-on-one therapy where it's just me and an adult I'm working with, or sometimes it's a child, so it's me and the child and their parents. But again, a lot of psychologists are doing a lot more consulting work where we'll go in to work with a business, we'll work with an institution like I was mentioning, like Charles Hall and Pride Manchester House and Prairie Learning Center and Dakota Boys and Girls Ranch, all of those kind of institutions. And again, while a lot of psychologists shy away from that because it's more headaches, I love the challenge of working together and trying to get a whole team collaborating on working together and solving the same problem.
And any advice that you would give to a high schooler who thinks they might be interested in this career?
Yeah, I think jump out there and do something with it. Volunteer or get involved with something where it's helping people. Obviously, as a young person, nobody's going to let you do psychology per se, like what would I do? But I think get involved with other people's lives a little bit and helping out and see if you have a knack for that.